Ed growing in the monster suit. So, a lot of people who've watched this episode have noticed that Ed gets a lot bigger for some reason when he's in the monster suit. And while this can just be passed as an animation trick to make him more menacing and intimidating and scary, it's kind of odd to think just how randomly bigger he gets. Like, I mean, the head connects with his movement and everything, and he can emote while in the suit. It's interesting to just think about how he physically did grow much bigger inside there. Some say he even became the monster himself. Mildred. Mildred is Double D's pet spider inside his basement. Despite having one appearance, Mildred was strangely interesting, at least just to dumb idiots like me who obsess over small things. And she was pretty characterized, like liking Double D and winking at him and everything, and we paid a lot of attention to her in that one thing. And something that I actually didn't really think of until hearing other people say this is that he might actually have more than one spider in the basement. Was meant to premiere in 1998. So Ed and Eddy was already all set to go in 1998. One ideal date it could have aired at and was even supposedly set for was in November. But for whatever reason, it was pushed back to the start of 1999, and it's not exactly known why this was. The show could have been even more 90s if that didn't happen. Man. A Fistful of Ed wasn't the last episode, and sorry if my voice was a bit fucked, but I just cleared it. Anyways, A Fistful of Ed was advertised as the finale, and they had this whole entire marathon leading up to it, and when it aired, it certainly did feel like the finale. It was the quote-unquote end of Season 5 and the series. But that wasn't at all the case, because not at all long after, very shortly after, actually, the Untitled special came on, and even back then that was pretty odd to me. And then a year afterwards, they had that very short quote-unquote season with only 2 episodes, and we're going to talk about that soon. And then a year after that, the movie happened. It's really curious and odd how it happened that way, especially since Untitled happened like right after that. I mean, I don't know why they couldn't just wait and hold off until after that, but yeah, who knows. Gertrude is the most reoccurring chicken. So Rolf had many chickens, as I'm sure you all know, and what many not seem to remember is that a couple of them were named, one of them being Beatrice, who was shown once. But aside from that, we mostly see Gertrude, and it probably goes over a lot of people's heads that she even has a name. And personally, I like to see that we always see Gertrude when there's a group of chickens. Like, I mean, Gertrude has been pointed out and stood out the most. And one of the most key roles was Gertrude being a victim in The Day the Ed Stood Still. And I didn't even notice for a while that Gertrude was stuck to the wall of Chunky Puffs. Danny voices Mr. Sun. So this is pretty self-explanatory, but at the beginning of the Untitled special, there's a gym sequence by Jimmy, and he's greeted by a character known as Mr. Sun there who says, "Good day, Jimmy," and this is Danny Antonui voicing him. Season 6 advertised as lost episodes. So remember those 2 seasons from the quote-unquote season that I mentioned earlier, or episodes I mean? May I Have This Ed and Look Before You Ed were those episodes, and they waited a year to air these after Fistful of Ed, and I still remember seeing the weird promos with the teeth and stuff to this day, and the shock that I felt seeing it. Not much is too known on why this happened and why they waited so long to air just these 2 episodes, but apparently Season 6 was meant to be a full season, even though they kind of already announced the finale, but then they got canned, so they just aired the 2 episodes that were already done much later, and apparently Danny has said before that another full season and a movie would have been too much, so he's fine with it. Jib is Ed's stan. So this is just a fun joke theory entry, but it's interesting to see the connections line up. And for those of you who don't know, stans are a concept from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and they're these invincible ghost spirit extensions of people who can use them. And it's basically another part of them, and they're usually invisible to people who can't use them either. And this relates to Jib, who is invisible to everybody, seemingly, except for Ed, and he was able to contact Eddy and beat him up and etc. And Eddy couldn't do jack shit. So while it's funny, it's also funny to see how it all lines up. Ed and Eddy's parents' arms. Most who watch this wonder where the adults were, and we're going to get into that much later. But a surprising amount of people either forgot or just never saw that you do see them. I mean, there's no faces here, but in Mission Ed Possible, you do see the arms of Ed's mom and Eddy's dad pull them away. So, yeah, there you go. The adults physically do exist. Teeth with faces. Kind of like Ed growing in the monster suit, this is just another weird and interesting detail and observation I made that was especially intriguing as a kid and struck me as odd. And in Floss Your Ed, Ed and Eddy lose their teeth, and once you see their teeth, they have these weird little XI faces for seemingly no reason, I guess to show that they're gone and quote-unquote dead. But it's just such a weird and neat little detail, and it also reminded me back then of how I could kind of make out faces on Eddy's splintered fingers when he hit plank in the first episode. But that's probably more of an odd, accidental thing that they did in me seeing things. Another interesting thing is that you can hear a disembodied voice when they're singling the Tooth Fairy. It is just a generic intercom voice, but it's still, really the only one that you hear outside of, the regular characters. And it's especially weird to hear earlier on in the series. Ed throwing his hat off in Lunchroom Rumble. So everybody always wondered, what's under Double D's hat? And yes, we are going to get more on that later, too. And a lot of people have seen, though, that in this Flash game, Double D will throw his hat off while winning. However, it's also corrected that it's not what's actually there. While this was officially made by Cartoon Network, it was developed by nobody from the actual show. And chances are the people didn't even know that's supposed to be a mystery of what's under there. And they just made some assumption oh yeah, do this. I mean, it's clear that they really didn't know much about the characters or the show. There's other missed details, Double D having, one of the fastest running speeds, despite that he's been shown to be a slow runner. And yeah, just none of it's at all canon. Edmund. This is another new entry, and it's also just a really late joke one. But when Ed releases all of his birds from his bedroom, he calls for them, and alongside Penelope and Nestor, there's also Edmund, and it's joked that this bird could be the fourth Ed. Yeah, just a funny thing, though. Good Lord, Ed, how can you live this way? And that does it for the tip. Sorry if I felt kind of rushed or even sounded more messed up than usual. My voice is kind of strained. I've been super busy while recording this, and like I said in the comment sections and other parts, after this part I need a break. Possibly a full week off, because there's so much other important things going on that I need to take care of. But then after that I'll be recovered and I'll do part 3, which starts the more interesting things and obscure things, and there'll be more consistent releases after that, so see you later in the month. Thank you, bye.